"Take off your shirt," the orc tattooist said. Sir Garrick Vale had obeyed orders while arrows darkened the sky, while cavalry thundered toward him, and once while a burning watchtower collapsed around his shoulders. None of those commands had stopped him as completely as this one. He stood inside a narrow studio above a dye shop in the rain-soaked port of Greyhaven. Blue glass lamps hung from the rafters. Bundles of dried herbs crowded the walls, and small clay bowls held inks black as deep water, red as sealing wax, and gold as the last edge of sunset. Outside, rain tapped against the round window overlooking the harbor. Across the room, Nyra waited beside a padded wooden chair. She was taller than Garrick by half a head, broad-shouldered and unmistakably orc. Her skin was a rich olive green. Two small ivory tusks rose past her lower lip, one circled by a thin copper band. Heavy black braids fell over one shoulder, threaded with blue beads and narrow silver rings. Her sleeveless charcoal tunic left her powerful arms bare, and both arms were covered in intricate tattoos. Dark waves, thorned vines, open eyes, and constellations picked out in pale gold ink. She did not stare at his sword, his expensive boots, or the knight's seal hanging from his belt. She stared at the hand he kept pressed over the left side of his ribs. "You came here to show me something," she said. "I cannot work through linen." Garrick looked at the locked door behind him. "You said no one would come upstairs." "No one will." "And the window?" "Faces outside that window would have to be 6 stories tall or very committed pigeons." He almost smiled. It had been long enough since that happened that the sensation felt unfamiliar. Nyra folded her arms. "If you have changed your mind, leave. I will return your deposit." "I haven't changed my mind." "Then take off your shirt." Garrick removed his cloak and laid it over the back of a stool. The sword belt followed. His fingers found the buttons of his shirt but stopped at the third one. For 9 years he had changed clothes in darkness. He had bathed alone, refused the help of squires, and slept in armor when there was any chance another soldier might enter his tent. He knew every ridge beneath the fabric without needing to see it. He knew exactly where the long scar crossed his shoulder, where 3 pale marks curved over his abdomen, and where the branded emblem remained beneath his heart. Most scars could be explained as the cost of service. The brand could not. Nyra moved away from him. She turned her back and began arranging needles on a clean cloth. The simple courtesy unsettled him more than curiosity would have. He unfastened the remaining buttons, pulled the shirt over his head, and placed it beside the cloak. "Ready?" he said. Nyra turned. Her eyes traveled over him once, slowly, but there was no disgust in them and no pity. Garrick had prepared himself for both. Instead, her expression sharpened with the concentration of a craftswoman assessing damaged material. The years of training had kept his body strong, though old injuries pulled one shoulder slightly lower than the other. A sword cut crossed his chest. Burns marked his right side. Beneath his left ribs, blackened scar tissue formed the outline of a crowned wolf with an arrow through its jaws. Nyra's calm vanished. "The Ash Legion," she said. Garrick's hand closed over the mark again. "I want it gone. Ink cannot make skin forget, then make it impossible to recognize." She approached, stopping an arm's length away. "Did you earn that mark?" "That depends on who tells the story." "I am asking you." Rain hissed against the window. Somewhere below, a cart rattled through the street, and a sailor shouted at a horse. Garrick met her amber eyes. "I wore their colors." Nyra's jaw tightened. "I did not come for absolution," he continued. "I came because 3 people in this city can cover a military brand without leaving it obvious underneath. One is dead. One works for the crown. The third is you. And you assume an orc will take any human silver. No. I assume the best artist in Greyhaven decides for herself. That made her look at him differently, though not more warmly. She pointed to the chair. Sit. Garrick sat. Nyra drew a smaller stool close, then paused before reaching for him. I need to examine the scar, she said. May I touch you? The question struck harder than the command had. No surgeon had asked. No officer had asked before holding him down. Varro certainly had not asked before heating the iron. Garrick forced his hand away from his ribs. Yes. Nyra's fingertips came to rest beside the brand, not on it. Her touch was warm, steady, and lighter than he expected from someone whose hands could probably bend a horseshoe. She traced the outer edge without pressing, his muscles locked beneath her fingers. Breathe, she said. I am breathing. Not usefully. He drew air through his nose. She leaned closer. He caught the scent of clove oil, rain, and the smoke used to sterilize her needles. One of her braids slid over her shoulder and brushed his forearm. He concentrated on that small contact, instead of the room 9 years earlier, the ropes around his wrists, and Commander Varro asking whether loyalty had finally become clear. Nyra removed her hand the instant his breathing changed. Who burned it into you? The man who commanded the Legion. Varro. Garrick looked up sharply. Orcs remember the names of men who burn villages, she said. Then you know why I want it hidden. I know why I should throw you down my stairs. You may, after you hear the rest. Nyra stood and walked to the window. Below them, Greyhaven climbed away from the harbor in steep streets of black stone and copper roofs. Rain made every lamp glow twice, once in the glass and once in the road. You have until the harbor bell, she said. If you enjoy original Orcbound fantasy romances and want to support the creation of future stories, you can join Tales from Orc on Patreon. The link is waiting in the description. Now, back to Nyra and Garrick. Garrick told her about the village of Hollow Ford. He did not make himself brave in the telling. That was the first truth he offered her. He had been 24, newly knighted, and proud enough to mistake obedience for honor. Commander Varro told the Legion that rebels were hiding among the millers and fishermen. Garrick believed him. He helped close the northern road. By the time he realized there were no rebels, the first houses were already burning. He had ordered his men to open the road. He had drawn his sword on another officer. He had led 23 villagers through a drainage channel beneath the mill while Varro's archers fired into the smoke. 23 escaped. More than 100 did not. Varro called Garrick's actions cowardice and treason. In front of the surviving officers, he branded Garrick with the Legion emblem, then declared that the mark would ensure no one forgot whom he had betrayed. But the war ended before Varro could hang him. The crown needed heroes, the army needed silence, and Garrick's family needed its name protected. So the record said Hollow Ford had been destroyed by rebels. The record said Garrick received his injuries defending civilians. The record said Varro retired with honor. And now? Nyra asked. Now Varro has been appointed master of the harbor guard. Her head turned. He arrives in Greyhaven in 12 days, Garrick said. The city council will confirm him in public. I intend to speak before they do. Then why hide the brand? Show it to them. Because his version of the story includes the same mark. He will say I received it willingly, that I helped him, and that I am accusing him only because we divided the spoils badly. Did you keep evidence? A field ledger, orders bearing his seal, the names of the soldiers who refused him. Where are they? Safe. Nyra gave him a flat look. That usually means lost, stolen, or hidden somewhere obvious. Safe enough that I am still alive. The harbor bell rang through the rain, low and enormous. Nyra looked at the branded wolf again. I will not erase it. Garrick rose. Then I have wasted your time. Sit down. I did not say I would do nothing. He remained standing. Nyra crossed to a cabinet and removed a sheet of thick paper. She placed it against the wall, took up a charcoal stick, and drew the crowned wolf from memory. Over it, she sketched a circle of waves. The arrow became the mast of a narrow ship. The wolf's jaws became broken chains trailing into the sea. A cover this dark will look like concealment, she said. People see concealment and imagine guilt. But if I open the old lines instead of burying them, the brand remains visible as what it is, an injury. Around it, I can place another story, one you chose. Garrick stared at the sketch. A ship leaving fire, Nyra continued. Broken chains, 23 stars, if that number matters to you. It matters. Then I need 4 sessions, perhaps 5. The scar is deep, and I will not rush it because a council enjoys ceremony. 12 days. Come tomorrow after sunset. You believe me? Nyra placed the charcoal on the table. No, but I believe scars. Yours do not look like the reward of a willing man. Garrick reached for his shirt. A night, she said. He turned. If I discover that you lied, you will leave this studio with a flower tattooed across your entire chest. He glanced at the beautiful, merciless vines covering her arms. That threat is less frightening than you think. For the first time, Nyra smiled. Nyra, it changed her whole face. Garrick carried the memory of it into the rain. The next evening, he returned 10 minutes early. Nyra made him wait outside until the exact hour. When she opened the door, she had replaced the loose charcoal tunic with a dark blue wrap fastened at one shoulder. Fresh ink stained 2 of her fingers. A pair of round spectacles rested low on her nose while she studied several new sketches spread across the work table. Garrick paused in the doorway. Something wrong? She asked. I did not expect spectacles. Were you hoping I would perform delicate work while unable to see? I did not say they were unwelcome. Take off your wet cloak before it drips on my floor. He obeyed. This time, removing his shirt took less than a minute. Nyra noticed. She said nothing. She showed him 3 designs. One was bold, almost like a battle standard. One turned the old brand into the roots of a windswept tree. The third was quieter. The ship, the broken chains, and 23 small stars arranged not in military ranks, but in a loose arc over dark water. Garrick touched the edge of the page. This one. Why? Because they were people, not a formation. Nyra nodded once. Lie back. The chair reclined until he was looking up at the rafters. She cleaned the scar with warm water and bitter-smelling spirits. Then she held the first needle above his skin. I will begin at the outer edge, she said. If you need me to stop, say stop. Not wait. Not perhaps. Stop. Understood. And do not attempt to impress me by enduring pain quietly. I work with warriors every week. It is their most tiresome habit. I thought an artist might appreciate stillness. Stillness, yes. Martyrdom, no. The needle touched him. Pain arrived as a bright, precise scratch. It was nothing compared with the brand, but his body did not know that. His hand clamped around the edge of the chair. Nyra stopped immediately. Look at me, she said. He did. Where are you? Your studio. What do you hear? He almost objected, then listened. Rain. The dye workers below. A ship horn. What do you smell? Clove oil. Anything else? Garrick met her eyes. You. One black eyebrow lifted. Smoke, he added. And cedar. Better. She returned the needle to his skin. This time he stayed in the room. The first session lasted 2 hours. Nyra worked in sections, cleaning each line before beginning the next. She did not fill silence merely because it existed. Garrick was grateful for that. Most people treated quiet as an accusation and hurried to defend themselves from it. After half an hour, he began studying the tattoos on her arms. The waves were not decorative. Each curl contained tiny symbols. Some looked like open hands. Others resembled hooks, feathers, or flames. Do they all mean something? He asked. Yes. Will you tell me? No. He waited. Nyra glanced up. You are supposed to ask again. You said no. Humans rarely consider that the end of a question. Knights are trained to recognize fortified positions. Her mouth curved, but she kept working. The waves are the road on my family traveled to Greyhaven. The eyes are for my grandmother, who claimed she could see a lie before it entered a mouth. The thorns are mine. What do they mean? That is still no. Fortified position, he said. She laughed softly. The sound loosened something in him. For the next hour they spoke in fragments. She asked why he had become a knight. He admitted that, at 18, polished armor and a horse seemed like sufficient reasons. He asked why she had become a tattooist. She said skin listened better than paper. When the pain grew sharper near the center of the brand, she placed one hand flat against his side to steady the skin. Her palm covered the lowest of his scars. Garrick's breath caught, but not from fear. Nyra noticed everything. Her gaze moved to his face. Stop? No. Are you certain? Yes. She held his eyes a moment longer, then continued. By the time she finished, dark ink outlined the first curling wave beneath the wolf. The design was incomplete, raw, and strange. Yet when Garrick looked down, the brand no longer seemed to occupy all the skin around it. Nyra covered the work with clean linen and tied the bandage around his torso. To secure it, she had to lean close and pass the cloth behind his back. Her braids slid across his bare shoulder. His face came level with the copper ring around her tusk. Neither of them moved for one unnecessary second. Then she pulled the knot tight. Keep it dry, she said. In Greyhaven? Become inventive. He reached for his shirt. A sharp knock struck the door. Nyra's expression changed at once. The warmth left it. Every line became guarded. Closed, she called. Crown inspection. A man answered from the landing. Garrick recognized the voice. He put one finger to his lips. Nyra looked from him to the door. She took the blue glass lamp from the table, extinguished it, and pointed toward a curtain at the rear of the studio. Garrick gathered his clothes and moved behind it, just as the knocking came again. You do not have authority to inspect private studios after dark, Nyra said. New harbor regulations. The new master has not been confirmed. He is eager. The latch rattled. Nyra opened the doors only as wide as her body. Garrick could see the visitor through a gap in the curtain. A square-faced officer wearing a rain-black cloak and the silver clasp of the Ash Legion. The sight of it turned Garrick's hands cold. The officer tried to look past Nyra. We are searching for a dangerous man. Then begin in a mirror. Human, late 30s, dark hair, scar over the right shoulder. You have described half the sailors in Greyhaven. He may have sought treatment for a mark on his chest. Nyra leaned against the frame, blocking the room. I decorate skin. I do not repair it. May I come in? No. The officer's gaze hardened. It would be unfortunate if the licensing board heard that an orc refused cooperation. It would be astonishing if the licensing board learned you were threatening a registered craftswoman without a written order. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the officer smiled without humor. "We will return in daylight. Bring an order." Nyra shut the door and drove the bolt home. Garrick stepped from behind the curtain, shirt still hanging from one hand. "You said the evidence was safe," she said. "It is." "You neglected to say Varro already knew you were here." "I did not know. An officer of the Legion described your scar outside my door. I noticed." She snatched his cloak from the stool and threw it at him. "Get dressed." Garrick buttoned his shirt carefully over the bandage. "I will not come back. If they are watching, you will come back tomorrow." He looked at her. Nyra lifted her chin. "I have begun the work. I will finish it. This is not your fight. A man came to my door wearing the emblem burned into your skin. He threatened my livelihood because I told him no. Do not insult me by deciding whether that matters. If Varro believes you are helping me, he may do worse than threaten you. Then perhaps you should stop him. That is what I am trying to do." "Good. Tomorrow after sunset." Garrick fastened his sword belt. "You are either very brave or entirely unreasonable. Those qualities often share a room." She opened a narrow side door leading to the roof stairs. Wind pushed rain into the studio. "Use the tiles," she said. "Cross 2 buildings, then descend beside the Cooper's yard. If you fall, I will deny knowing you." Garrick stepped into the rain, then turned. "Nyra." "What?" "Thank you." Her expression softened, but only at the edges. "Keep the bandage dry." He crossed the rooftop, smiling despite himself. By morning, the rain had become a storm, and Garrick's room at the Sailmaker's Rest had been searched. Nothing was missing. But 2 men in plain coats watched the inn from across the street. Varro had not found the ledger. Garrick had hidden it behind a memorial stone in the chapel of the Harbor Saints. And even the chapel keeper did not know what the waxed packet contained. Yet if Varro's men had followed him to Greyhaven, everyone he visited was in danger. Nyra most of all. He reached her building by the rooftops, as instructed. The storm had turned the tiles slick, and he arrived soaked from hair to boots, despite the oilskin cloak. Nyra opened the side door before he knocked. I said, "Keep the bandage dry." "The bandage is dry." Water ran from his sleeves onto her floor. She looked down. "Remarkable. It has learned to swim." The rest of me made a sacrifice. Nyra pulled him inside and closed the door against the wind. The studio was warmer than the night before. A brazier glowed near the chair, and a kettle steamed above it. She had covered the round window with a heavy wool cloth. Garrick removed his cloak. My room was searched. Did they find what they wanted? No. Will they? Not unless they know exactly where to look. That was not the question. He met her eyes. Possibly. Nyra poured 2 cups of bitter, smoky tea and pushed one toward him. Its heat reached his chest before the storm could. Nyra sat on the edge of her work table. "Tell me where the evidence is." "No." "If they take you, someone must retrieve it." "If they take me, knowing the location will place you in danger." "I am already in danger." "Not the same kind." Her tusks showed as her lips tightened. "You came into my studio, placed Varro's mark under my hand, and brought his officers to my door. Now you want to protect me by keeping me ignorant." "Yes." The blunt answer caught her off guard. "I know it is infuriating," he said. "It is also the only advantage we have. Varro cannot force from you what you do not know." Nyra studied him over the rim of her cup. You expect to be taken. I expect him to try. And if he succeeds? Garrick looked toward the covered window. Then I hope the council recognizes a dead man's accusation as worth examining. That is a poor plan. It is the plan available to me. No, it is the plan you chose while alone. She pushed away from the table and took his empty cup. The movement was controlled, but anger followed her like heat. Shirt, she said. He blinked. You are still going to work? I am angry, not unreliable. Garrick removed his shirt. The bandage beneath was, in fact, dry. Nyra untied it, and the backs of her fingers brushed his abdomen. This time his body tightened for an entirely different reason. She examined the ink. No swelling. The line held well. You sound disappointed. I enjoy being right, even when it prevents a lecture. She had him sit upright instead of reclining. Tonight she worked along his ribs, adding the first length of broken chain. Her stool fit between his knees, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her through the fabric of her wrap. Every few minutes she turned to dip the needle, and one of her shoulders brushed his chest. Neither mentioned it. The rain beat harder overhead. Did you always live in Greyhaven? Garrick asked. No. Fortified position? A gate, not yet locked. He waited. Nyra worked another line before speaking. My family came from the western marshes. We traded dyes, medicines, and ceremonial inks. When I was 15, human merchants began selling copies of our designs in the capital. Without permission, without understanding, a mourning mark became fashionable on wedding gloves. A symbol worn after childbirth appeared on tavern signs. One merchant painted our protection spiral on soldiers' shields and claimed it made them fearless. Garrick glanced at the complex patterns on her arms. Is that why you refuse to explain the thorns? Partly. Meaning is not a coin. I do not hand it to everyone who asks. Then why work in a human city? Because hiding a craft does not protect it. Teaching people to respect it might. She wiped away a bead of ink. Also, Greyhaven has ships, terrible weather, and enough foolish sailors to pay my rent. A compelling cultural argument. I thought so. Garrick watched her hands. Does my design borrow from your people? No, I made it for you. The words settled between them. No one has done that before, he said. Nyra looked up. Made you a tattoo? Made something that belonged only to me? Her expression softened. Then you have known selfish people. I was raised among nobles. It was unavoidable. And yet, you became one of their knights. I was trying to become the man they praised in songs. Did you? He considered it. No. I became the man who learned songs omit the smell. Nyra's hand went still. Smoke? She asked. Among other things. She placed the needle down. Turn. Why? Your shoulder is pulling. I want to see the scar on your back. He turned on the chair. The largest scar ran from the top of his right shoulder almost to his spine. Nyra did not touch it. Sword? Falling beam. At Hollow Ford? He nodded. Does it ache in rain? Everything aches in Greyhaven rain. That is not an answer. Yes. She crossed to a shelf, returned with a small jar, and opened it. A clean scent of mint and cedar rose from the pale salve. This will help, she said. May I? Garrick looked over his shoulder. Her amber eyes held no impatience. Yes. Nyra warmed the salve between her palms and began working it into the muscle beside the scar. The pressure was firm and careful. Garrick's eyes closed before he could prevent it. Pain had lived there so long that he had stopped noticing it as a separate thing. Under her hands, the tight muscle gradually loosened. His head lowered. A breath left him that felt 9 years old. "Better?" she asked. "Dangerously." "Why dangerously?" "I may refuse to leave." Her hands paused at his shoulder blades. "That would be inconvenient," she said. "For your rent?" "For my reputation. People might assume I allow knights to live here." "A scandal. Unthinkable." She resumed, slower now. Garrick felt each pass of her thumbs beside the scar, each sweep of her palms over his shoulders. When he turned his head, they were closer than he realized. Nyra stood behind him, leaning over one shoulder. Her face was inches from his. He saw a tiny fleck of blue ink near her jaw. She saw him looking. The room became very quiet. Garrick could have closed the distance. The desire to do so was sudden, clear, and strong enough to make his pulse beat beneath the unfinished tattoo. But Nyra had spent 2 evenings asking before every touch. He would not repay that care by assuming. "There is ink on your face," he said. Something unreadable moved through her eyes. "There usually is." He turned forward again. Nyra's hands left his shoulders. "The session is finished," she said. Her voice was perfectly calm, which told him nothing. She bandaged his side, then wrapped the salve jar in brown paper and pressed it into his hand. "Use this before sleep. A small amount." "Will it cure poor planning?" "No. For that, I prescribe listening to me." "And what would your improved plan be?" Nyra carried their cups to a basin. "You make a copy of the evidence. You put the original somewhere Varro cannot reach. You arrange for the copy to appear before the council even if you are arrested." "I have considered that." "Consider faster." He buttoned his shirt. "Paper can be destroyed. So can men. That is why I need witnesses." Nyra turned. "The people you let out of Hollow Fort. Where are they?" "Scattered. Some changed their names. Most have families now." "And you will not ask them to risk those families?" "No." "Because you are honorable?" "Because they have already paid." Her gaze dropped to the bandage beneath his shirt. "So have you." Garrick gave a quiet laugh. "That is generous. Do not mistake fairness for generosity." Before he could answer, glass shattered in the dye shop below. Nyra blew out the lamp while Garrick drew his sword. "Roof stairs," he whispered. "My family's designs are here." She pulled 2 leather folios from a cabinet, just as 3 armed men broke through the door. A crossbow bolt struck the work table Garrick overturned. Nyra answered with a steaming kettle, forcing the bowman back. Garrick disarmed the swordsman, while Nyra twisted the cudgel from the 3rd attacker and put him on the floor. Within moments, Garrick's sword point rested beneath the crossbowman's chin. "Who sent you?" The man spat blood onto the floor. Nyra picked up the cudgel. "Answer him." He looked at her and decided Garrick was the safer audience. "We were told to find a packet." "By whom?" Garrick asked. "A harbor officer." "Name?" He never gave one. Garrick pressed the sword point closer. "Then describe him." "Gray hair, burn on his left hand. Wore a silver wolf clasp." "Varro." He was already in Greyhaven. The confirmation hit Garrick like a cold wave. "You are all leaving," she said. "You will tell the man with the burned hand that my studio contains no packet. If any of you return, I will use you to teach apprentices where not to place needles." The crossbowman swallowed. Garrick took their weapons, and Nyra marched them into the storm. Below, the dye shop stood empty and wrecked, indigo waters spreading across the floor like spilled night. Nyra stood in the wreckage, breathing hard. "Are you hurt?" Garrick asked. "No." "Let me see your hands." "I said I am not hurt. And I have learned you become less truthful when angry." She glared at him, then held out her hands. The right one was uninjured. Blood ran from a cut across her left palm where the attacker's buckle had caught her. Garrick sheathed his sword. Upstairs. Do not command me in my own building. Please go upstairs so I can clean that before you bleed on the designs you refuse to abandon. Nyra looked at the blood, muttered something in Orcish, and climbed. He seated her in the same chair he had occupied minutes earlier. She watched while he washed his hands, opened her medical box, and chose clean linen. You know what you are doing, she said. Battlefields produce either competent bandaging or many funerals. He rinsed the cut. Nyra did not flinch, but the muscles in her arm tightened. May I? He asked, holding the folded cloth above her palm. Her gaze lifted to his. Perhaps she understood then how closely he had listened to every question she asked him. Perhaps he understood how rarely anyone returned such care to her. Yes, she said. Garrick wrapped her hand slowly. His fingers looked pale against her green skin. They were not as different as the city pretended. Both bore old cuts. Both had calluses in the places work demanded. When he finished, he did not release her immediately. Neither did she pull away. The man who hired them is Varro, Garrick said. The burn on his hand came from the same iron he used on me. Nyra's thumb moved once against his knuckle. He is here early. Yes. Then you cannot return to your inn. I have other places. Places he will search. Probably. Stay here. The words were quiet. Garrick looked at the broken door, the overturned table, and the blood drying on her floor. I brought this to you. Then help me clean it. Nyra. The room above the studio has a lock. The roof has 2 exits. No one downstairs will betray you, especially after what those men did to the dye shop. That is not what concerns me. What concerns you? He was still holding her hand. He became acutely aware of it. You, he said. Nyra's amber eyes searched his face. Good. Good. I was beginning to think you only removed your shirt for the tattoo. Garrick forgot every careful answer he had ever learned. Nyra gently pulled her bandaged hand from his and stood. The broom is behind the cabinet, she said. She walked away before he saw whether she was smiling. He found the broom. They repaired the door, rescued the uncontaminated inks, and ate bread and fish from one plate because the other had shattered. After midnight, Nyra led him to the small room above the studio. One narrow bed occupied most of it. They argued briefly over the chair and the cold floor until Nyra folded her arms. The bed is large enough for 2. Garrick became very still. Nyra's tusks caught the lamplight as she pressed her lips together. That was not an invitation to behave foolishly. I did not think it was. There will be a blanket between us. A formidable defense. I own several knives. More formidable. Do not make me regret offering, she warned. Garrick lay fully clothed on the far side. A folded blanket formed a ridge down the center. Nyra emerged in a long gray sleeping tunic, her braids unbound into heavy black hair. He stared 1 second too long. Turn around, Knight, she said, lowering the lamp. He obeyed, smiling into the pillow. The mattress shifted as she lay down. Rain drummed against the roof. The folded blanket between them seemed both absurdly narrow and several miles wide. Garrick? It was the first time she had used his name. Yes? Did you truly save 23 people? He stared into the dark. I led 23 out. That is not what I asked. No, I did not save them. I helped close the road that trapped them. Anything I did after was too late. Nyra was silent. You think that is why I cannot sleep? He asked. I think you have spent 9 years making sure punishment arrives every night, even when Varro is absent. He turned his head. In the faint light, her eyes were open. And you? He asked. Why can't you sleep? A man broke my door. You threw boiling water at him. Both facts can trouble me. Garrick shifted onto his side, careful not to cross the blanket. They will not come back tonight. How do you know? Because Varro wanted the ledger quietly. 3 bodies outside an orc woman's studio would attract the wrong kind of attention. That is an unpleasant reassurance. It is all I have. Nyra closed her eyes. Minutes passed. Her breathing slowed, but it did not become the rhythm of sleep. Garrick's shoulder ached. He reached for the paper-wrapped jar on the floor and tried to open it with one hand. Give it to me, she said, without opening her eyes. You were asleep? You are loud when pretending not to hurt. She sat up, took the jar, and moved the folded blanket aside. Garrick looked at the vanished boundary. Turn, she said. He pulled his shirt over his head, loosened the bandage enough to expose his shoulder, and sat with his back to her. Nyra warmed the salve and worked it beside the old scar. Her hands moved more slowly than before. In the dark, without the studio chair or the needles, the touch felt less like treatment and more like something neither of them had named. Garrick lowered his head. You should not trust me. I do not. You invited me into your bed? I trusted the rain less. Comforting. Her fingers pressed into a knot beneath his shoulder blade. I trust that you had 3 chances to kill men tonight and did not. I trust that you asked before touching my hand. I trust that you looked away when I changed, even though the screen did not close properly. Garrick glanced back. It didn't? Nyra pushed his shoulder. Do not ruin the point. He laughed, then hissed as the motion pulled the tattoo. Her hand flattened over his upper back. Careful. I had forgotten laughing could be hazardous. Around fresh ink, everything is hazardous. She finished with the salve, but left her palm against him. Garrick turned slowly. They were close enough that he could feel her breath. Nyra's loose hair fell around one shoulder, black against gray linen. He wanted to lift it away from her face. He wanted to kiss the corner of her mouth beside the copper-banded tusk. He wanted, with an intensity that frightened him, to be touched without pain attached to the memory. But wanting was not permission. May I kiss you? He asked. Nyra studied him for one long heartbeat. Not tonight, she said. The refusal was gentle and absolute. Garrick nodded. Not tonight. Something in her face eased. Perhaps she had expected persuasion. Perhaps she had expected wounded pride. He turned back and lay down on his side of the bed. Nyra replaced the blanket between them, but lower this time, leaving no barrier between their shoulders. Just before sleep, her fingers found his hand in the dark. She did not lace them together. She simply rested 2 fingertips against his knuckles, and Garrick understood it as the answer to a different question. He woke to the smell of coffee and an empty space beside him. For one disorienting moment, Garrick did not know where he was. Then he saw the stacks of drawings, the rain-bright window, and the folded blanket lying on the floor. Nyra stood at the washstand with her back to him, braiding her hair. Morning light traced the strong line of her shoulders through a fresh green tunic. She fastened the last braid with a silver ring and looked at him in the mirror. You snore, she said. I do not. The roof disagrees. The roof survived a storm. It is confused. She handed him a cup of coffee. Their fingers touched. Neither mentioned the question he had asked in the dark or the answer she had given. "We retrieved the evidence today," Nyra said. "We? If you say this is not my fight again, I will reopen your tattoo with a spoon." Garrick drank the coffee. "You should know that threats made before breakfast are considered especially serious under Crown law." "Good." He set the cup down. "The packet is in the chapel of the Harbor Saints." Nyra did not smile in victory. "Who else knows?" "The keeper knows I hid a packet, not what it is." "Then Varro may already be watching the chapel." "He may." "We need a distraction." Nyra painted a crude crowned wolf on a wooden sign and added a line in red. "Ash Legend officers receive free tattoos today." Garrick stared at it. "That is your distraction?" "No, this is bait." She placed it outside. When the watcher crossed over to argue with the dye workers, Nyra and Garrick escaped across the roof. They reached the chapel by separate routes. Garrick entered through the front, wearing a borrowed fisherman's coat. Nyra used the narrow service alley and waited beside the rear door. No soldiers followed either of them. The chapel keeper had vanished. His little desk stood open. A cup of tea had gone cold beside an unfinished page of accounts. The memorial stone remained in place, but scratches around its edge showed that someone had already tried to move it. Garrick's stomach tightened. He knelt and pressed his thumb into a nearly invisible groove beneath one carved name. The marble panel released. The waxed packet was still inside. Nyra exhaled behind him. Safe was almost accurate. Garrick opened the packet. The field ledger lay within, along with 6 sealed orders and a list written in his own hand. The pages smelled faintly of wax and damp stone. "We make copies now," Nyra said. "The soldiers may have the keeper." "Which means Varro knows the evidence is in this chapel but does not know where. If we search for the keeper before moving it, we lose both." Garrick hated the logic because it was correct. They took the packet back to the dye shop, where the owner kept a small block press for printing fabric patterns. By noon, the workers had turned it into a crude printing room. Garrick read each order aloud, while Nyra and 3 ink-stained apprentices copied the words onto paper. Every sheet was checked against the original twice. They made 12 sets. 1 went to the council clerk, 1 to the royal magistrate, 1 to the captain of the largest merchant fleet in the harbor. Others went to temples, guild halls, and 2 tavern owners who disliked Varro more than they feared him. Each set traveled by a different hand. Nyra placed the original packet inside one of her family folios, between pages of ceremonial designs. "No soldier looking for a ledger will dare sort through 200 drawings of naked people," she said. "You have 200 drawings of naked people?" "Professional studies." "Of course. You sound disappointed that they are professional." Garrick looked at her over the paper. "I am trying to decide whether honesty is dangerous." "With me?" "Usually." "Then I will say only that your collection interests me." Nyra's slow smile made the room feel warmer than the brazier did. That afternoon, they learned the chapel keeper had been arrested for theft. No charge had been filed, and no city jail admitted holding him. Varro had him. The council clerk also sent word that Garrick would be permitted to speak at the confirmation hearing in 4 days, not 12. Varro had moved the ceremony forward. "He wants less time for the copies to spread," Garrick said. Nyra looked at the unfinished tattoo. "And less time for me." They worked every night. The second long session laid the ship's hull across the old emblem. The third turned the wolf's crowned head into black rocks breaking beneath waves. Around them, 23 stars appeared one by one. Garrick learned the rhythm of Nyra's hands, the cool wipe of water, the sharp point of the needle, the press of her palm when his breathing changed. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes the quiet between them felt complete rather than empty. Nyra learned that Garrick hated sweet wine, could repair almost any leather strap, and knew the names of birds but pretended not to because the skill seemed insufficiently knightly. Garrick learned that Nyra sang while grinding ink, kept sugared orange peel in the top drawer, and had once tattooed a sea serpent around a sailor's waist, only to discover he was terrified of fish. He slept above the studio each night. The blanket remained between them on the bed, but it became less effective as a border. On the second night, Garrick woke with Nyra's hand resting against his shoulder. On the third, her back fit against his chest, while rain murmured on the roof. Neither pretended it had happened by accident. They did not kiss. Garrick did not ask again. He understood that Nyra's first answer meant not yet, not persuade me. The difference mattered. It mattered more each time she trusted him with another small thing. The key to the front door, the location of her family folios, the sight of her unbraided hair, the soft sound she made when his thumb eased the ache from her injured palm. On the night before the hearing, Nyra finished the 23rd star. Garrick sat upright in the studio chair while she cleaned the entire design. The old brand had not vanished. Its burned lines remained visible beneath the waves and the ship. But it no longer looked like an emblem worn with pride. It looked broken, exposed, and left behind. The ship sailed above it. "There is one section left," Nyra said. "The mast. The arrow that crossed the wolf's mouth will become the mast. That is the deepest scar. Can you finish tonight?" She looked tired. A faint shadow lay beneath her eyes, and her injured hand was still bandaged. "Yes. That was too quick. We do not have another night." "Then it remains unfinished." Nyra frowned. "You need the design complete for the hearing. I need your hand steady for the next 50 years. That is dramatic. I was raised on songs." She set down the needle. "Tomorrow, Varro will call this a criminal's attempt to disguise his mark. Then you will explain what it is." "You want me at the hearing?" "I want you nowhere near Varro." "That sounds more familiar. But I have learned the limits of deciding for you." Nyra removed her spectacles. "Have you?" "Painfully." "Good." She placed clean linen over the tattoo, but instead of wrapping it at once, she let her fingertips rest near the final star. "Why did you not ask me again?" she said. Garrick knew what she meant. "You knew I wanted to." "Yes." "Then there was no need to make you refuse twice." Her eyes lifted to his. "And if my answer changed?" His pulse jumped. "I hoped you would tell me." Nyra stepped between his knees. "It changed," she said. Garrick did not move. "What is your answer now?" She placed one hand at the side of his neck. Her thumb brushed the edge of his beard. "Yes." He kissed her. For all the time he had spent imagining it, the reality startled him. Nyra's mouth was warm and careful at first, her tusks brushing his lower lip. Then her fingers slid into his hair, and careful became certain. Garrick's hands found her waist. He felt the strength beneath her tunic, the rise of her breath, and the sudden shiver she tried to hide. He drew her closer, but stopped when the bandage pulled across his ribs. Nyra broke the kiss, breathing hard. "Fresh ink. A terrible inconvenience. I warned you. You did not warn me about this. Would it have helped?" "No." She smiled against his mouth and kissed him again, slower this time. When they finally separated, Garrick rested his forehead against hers. The blue lamps glowed around them. Rain traced silver paths down the window. "Tomorrow," Nyra said. "You tell the truth. Tomorrow, And you do not attempt to die impressively. I will try to survive in a very ordinary manner. Good. A knock sounded at the repaired door. They froze. Only one knock. Then silence. Garrick reached for his sword. Nyra took the cudgel she had kept beside the cabinet. When Garrick opened the door, the chapel keeper collapsed into his arms. The old man's face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. A strip of bloody cloth bound his wrists. He had escaped through a warehouse drain after Varro's men moved him before dawn. He knows about the hearing, the keeper whispered. He knows you sent copies. He said paper can burn with buildings. Garrick helped him into the chair. Which building? Nyra asked. The council hall. The harbor bell began to ring. Not the slow measure of the hour. The rapid, violent alarm for fire. They ran to the window. Across the wet rooftops, orange light climbed into the sky. The council hall was burning. Varro had made his answer. By dawn, the council's records rooms were blackened ruins, and 2 copies had burned. Varro expected the fire to cancel the hearing. Instead, hundreds gathered because people who might ignore an old massacre became interested when a future commander set fire to their city. The council moved the hearing to the Harbor Exchange, a vast stone building where merchants shouted prices from tiered galleries. By mid-morning, every bench was full. Garrick entered without armor, wearing a black coat over a white shirt. Nyra walked beside him in dark blue, carrying the folio containing the original ledger. Every eye in the exchange turned toward them. At the center of the chamber, Commander Varro waited before the council table. 9 years had narrowed him, but not diminished him. His hair was iron gray, his uniform perfectly fitted, and the old burn twisted the fingers of his left hand. The silver wolf clasp gleamed at his collar. When he saw Nyra, his smile changed. "You brought a decorator," he said. Nyra handed the folio to the council clerk. "And you brought a costume. We all make choices." Laughter broke from one gallery. Varro's smile disappeared. The council called the hearing to order. Varro spoke first, calling himself a loyal soldier and Garrick a coward who had spent 9 years inventing excuses. He was calm. He was precise. He lied with the confidence of a man who had been believed for years. Then Garrick took his place before the council. His hands were cold, but his voice did not shake. He told the truth, not the polished truth he had once considered giving. Not a version that began with his defiance and ended with the people he led to safety. He began with the road he helped close. He named the orders he followed before he resisted. He described the first burning roof, the civilians trapped beside the mill, and his own delay in understanding what Varro intended. The chamber grew still. When he finished, the clerk opened the field ledger. The original seals matched those on the copied orders already circulating through the galleries. Varro called them forgeries. Garrick removed his coat. Nyra stepped beside him and unbuttoned the shirt as far as the bandage. Her hands were steady. She untied the linen and exposed the unfinished tattoo to the council. A murmur rose. The ship rode over black water. Broken chains curved along Garrick's ribs. 23 stars crossed his chest. Beneath them all, the crowned wolf remained visible in pale, twisted scar tissue. "He wears the Legion mark," Varro said. "He has merely decorated his guilt." "No," Nyra replied. "He wears a brand." She faced the council. Ink enters the surface. A brand destroys it. This iron was pressed upward and inward while the body was held flat. The deepest burn lies beneath the left edge, where the handler leaned his weight. The skin tore at both shoulders because the victim was restrained. These are not marks taken by a willing soldier. Varro's burned hand closed into a fist. Nyra pointed to the crooked arrow in the wolf's mouth. The tool slipped here. Whoever held it lost strength in the final moment. A burn injury in the left hand would explain the angle. Every gaze moved to Varro's glove. He pulled his hand behind his back. "The word of an orc tattooist," he said, "against a decorated commander." "No," came a voice from the upper gallery. "Against us too." An elderly woman stood. Beside her rose a fisherman with a damaged leg, then a gray-bearded miller, then a younger woman who had been a child at Hollow Ford. They were 4 of the 23 people Garrick had led through the drainage channel. He had not summoned them. The printed orders had. The woman in the gallery looked down at him. "You opened the road," she said. "Late, but you opened it." Garrick could not speak. Varro moved first. His burned hand tore a narrow knife from inside his sleeve. He did not strike at Garrick. He lunged for the ledger. Nyra caught the folio against her chest and turned away. Garrick stepped between them. The blade entered his side, just above the unfinished tattoo. Pain flashed white. He seized Varro's wrist with both hands. For one terrible instant, they stood as they had 9 years earlier. Commander and subordinate, the iron between them. Obedience mistaken for power. Then Garrick understood what had changed. He was not alone. Nyra struck Varro's burned hand. The knife fell. Harbor guards rushed from the council doors, not under Varro's command yet, and forced him to the floor. The chamber erupted. Garrick looked down. Blood spread across his white shirt. Nyra caught him before his knees reached the stone. "You promised ordinary survival," she said. "I am trying. Try harder." Her voice broke on the last word. Garrick pressed one hand over hers at his side. "The ink?" Nyra stared at him in disbelief. "If you die worried about my line work, I will bring you back and kill you myself." He smiled because she was there, because Varro was in chains, and because the 23 stars above the old brand were no longer his private burden. Then the chamber darkened. When Garrick opened his eyes, he was in Nyra's bed, his side bandaged. The blade had missed anything vital. Nyra sat in a chair beside the bed, asleep with her head resting on folded arms. Her bandaged hand lay inches from his. Garrick touched her hair. She woke instantly. For a second, relief stripped every defense from her face. Then she sat upright and frowned. "You are an exhausting man." "I have been unconscious. Exhaustingly." "Varro?" he asked. "Charged with abduction, arson, assault, and falsifying military records. The keeper is alive. The ledger is safe. And you?" Nyra looked down. Angry. "I can see that. You stepped in front of a knife. You were holding the evidence. I am capable of moving. I was closer. That is not a defense." Garrick reached for her hand. She resisted for half a heartbeat, then let him take it. "I am sorry," he said. "For being stabbed? For frightening you?" Nyra's eyes shone. "Good." He lifted her bandaged palm to his lips and kissed the center of it. "The tattoo is ruined, isn't it?" he asked. "No." The knife cut beside the mast. "Can you finish it? When you heal? Will you?" She leaned closer. "I said I finished my work." "Only your work?" Nyra looked at him for a long moment. "No." She kissed him gently, careful of his side. This time there was no deadline waiting beyond the door, no unasked question between them, and no commander deciding what either of them deserved. 3 months later, the blue lamps in Nyra's studio burned brighter than before. The dye workers had repaired the downstairs shop. The city paid for a new door after the magistrate declared the original destruction part of Varro's crimes. Nyra used the money left over to buy a second tattoo chair and hired her first apprentice. Garrick refused the council's offer to command the harbor guard. He accepted a smaller position investigating military abuses, with the condition that complaints from Orc neighborhoods would no longer be dismissed before they were read. The work paid less than command and made him far less popular at noble dinners. He considered both advantages. On the first clear evening of winter, he climbed the stairs above the dye shop and found Nyra waiting beside the window. "Take off your shirt," she said. Garrick closed the door behind him. "You have become predictable. You still have an unfinished mast." He removed his coat, sword belt, and shirt without hesitation. The knife wound had healed to a thin pink line. The tattoo around it was complete, except for one final stroke, where the old arrow rose toward the ship's sail. Nyra touched the new scar. "Pain?" "None." "Liar. Only when I twist." "Then do not twist." "Excellent medical advice." He sat in the chair. Nyra prepared the gold-black ink, adjusted her spectacles, and placed one warm hand against his ribs. "Ready?" she asked. Garrick looked down at the crowned wolf beneath the waves. For years, he had believed healing meant removing every trace of what had been done to him. Nyra had shown him another possibility. The scar could remain without owning him. The truth could include his failure without ending there. And a touch could be remembered for tenderness instead of pain. "Ready?" he said. The needle entered the skin. Nyra drew the final line upward, transforming the Legion's arrow into the mast of a ship sailing toward open water. When she finished, she cleaned the ink and studied her work. "There," she said. "Now it belongs to you." Garrick rose. "Not only to me." Nyra removed her spectacles. "No." He took her carefully by the waist. 23 stars for the people who escaped. Broken chains for the truth. A ship for the city where I found the most stubborn artist alive. You forgot beautiful. I was saving that. For what? This. He kissed her. Nyra's arms went around his neck. The blue beads in her braids clicked softly against his shoulder. Outside, the harbor shone beneath a clear sky, and ships passed between the lights toward places neither of them had seen. When the kiss ended, she kept him close. "You know," she said, "the room upstairs still has only one bed. A serious architectural problem. We should discuss solutions. At length." She smiled, warm and unguarded. Garrick looked once more at the finished tattoo. The brand was still there. So were the burns, the sword cuts, and the new scar beside the mast. But the crowned wolf had been broken by waves. The ship had survived the rocks, and above it sailed 23 stars, each one proof that the worst thing a man had done did not have to be the last thing he chose. Nyra took his hand and led him toward the stairs. For the first time in 9 years, Garrick followed without wondering whether obedience would cost him himself. This time, he knew exactly whom he trusted.